Source is a podcast made by women for women. We talk with a wide variety of experts, ranging from a sex therapist to the CDC and everywhere in between, to bring you the stories you're only going to hear here. Our goal is to entertain and educate, because it's more clear now than ever just how much we as women are doing, as parents, as spouses, employees, just as everything. Don't miss out on being in the know. Subscribe to Soul Source wherever you listen to podcasts today. Leave us a review too, because this part's really important. When you leave those reviews, that's how we're able to continue bringing you the content you love each and every week. So buckle up, Soul Source Society, because we're about to get started.
Every time we diet and we drop a lot of weight, we are also losing muscle mass, and sometimes we're losing a bit of bone as well.
Hey everybody, I am Raquel Lamel, your host here on Soul Source. And ladies, unless someone has found the fountain of youth out there, and if you have, please tell me about it, we're all gonna get older. We're all gonna age. Aging for the guys seems to be easier. I feel like they get terms like silver fox, and they're seen as, wise with wisdom. And as us women age, it's not the same for us. But things come with aging, right? You get wrinkles, you get gray hair, and oftentimes health problems come with age as well. However, today we're talking about turning back the clock, because you don't always have to have all of those things happen to you. Today especially, this is for the middle-aged gals out there who are noticing changes in your body, and you're still able to reverse some of the bad decisions you might have made when you were younger, because let's face it, we all do that. My guest today is Kate Milne. She's a healthy aging specialist, and she focuses on women in middle to older ages of life. Now, Kate, I'm so excited to have you here today because I'm 31 years old. I just had a baby. I feel like I'm fully in that middle-aged area, and I'm already noticing some changes with the way my body just kind of processes things. So I'm excited to dive into everything we're going to talk about here today.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me, and kudos to thinking about your aging when you're 31. So that's fantastic. Great time to start.
I definitely know I don't feel the same as I did when I was 16, 18. Like, it's definitely not the same.
Yeah, and especially after having a baby, right? We have those changes and start to notice. For sure.
So you said you're a healthy aging specialist for women. What does that mean? Start there.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a niche area, I guess. I am a clinical exercise physiologist by training, and I'm a health promoter. So what that means is I work with big populations of people. I try to get entire communities, cities, big populations healthier. And a lot of the work, 100% of my work in the last about 17 or 18 years has been in healthy aging, working with older adults, healthy aging research as well. So I think it's just easier for people to get a sense of what I do by saying I'm a healthy aging specialist. Sometimes it's a longer conversation if I try to go through a lot of my background, but just, I guess it's just the simplest way to say I help people live their best kind of midlife and beyond by everything that I've learned by working with folks who are much later in the aging process, and also with women in midlife in the research that I've done. So yeah, it's a growing field because we have huge population aging right now. We've got a big group of people getting older and not so many people coming up behind them. So it'll be a big concern.
So what made you want to get started in this line of work? And did you try any of this personally? And, do you have any personal ties to the work that you do?
Yeah, so I think just out of good modeling from a parent, from my dad, who was a grizzled old runner. He was a physician. He, got up every day and exercised, and him just modeling that gave me a lifetime of being active. So I've always been active. I've always been a runner. I do a lot of hiking. I strength train, but the more I got into it in terms of research and in my education, I just realized the power of particularly exercise. I mean, I can talk about all sorts of other parts of healthy living, but exercise, I think, is the foundation of all of that. I mean, If we had a pill that we could give to people that did all of the things that exercise does, we'd give it to everybody, every single patient, because it's that powerful. And so, yeah, I put a lot of those things into place, knowing that those were kind of like the same way you put money into your retirement savings, right? That you're adding all of these good pieces of your foundation to getting older. And one of the things that really interested me, or maybe really inspired me to work in healthy aging, was watching my mother age. Here was someone who was really, thin and active. Well, didn't say active in the traditional way. She didn't exercise, but thin and was able to kind of move around easily. And when she hit menopause, her lifetime of bad habits kind of caught up with her very rapidly. And she had a really rough last 15 or 20 years of her life. It was like all of those things that she hadn't worked on in terms of prevention caught up with her. And so that really inspired me to start looking at how people were aging. You probably know yourself, those folks who, are in their 80s and they're hiking and doing all sorts of amazing physical things. And then younger people who, are sore and having trouble getting around. And, they're already feeling the effects of not having a healthy lifestyle.
So, you focus on middle age, right? So can you start off, what is middle age? What is that age range?
Yeah, it's always tough. I get asked this a lot in terms of, what's an older adult, what's a senior, what's middle age. It's different depending on the research that you look at. But right now, I think the consensus is it's about 35 to about 56, which seems funny, right? Because 56 being middle age, not many of us are living, well over 100, but it's really happening more and more. So I think they've shifted that idea or the thought of middle age into mid 50s.
Okay, and so you mentioned your mom, so that actually sets me up perfectly for the question I'm going to ask you, because a lot of times people be like, okay, once you start to get sick, it's too late, you can't reverse it. Is that the case?
No, not necessarily. I don't want to be an alarmist here, but the biggest thing that kills women worldwide is cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease kills more women than all cancers combined, right? And so if you think about all of the things that lead up to cardiovascular disease, so diabetes, high blood pressure, inactivity, there are a whole bunch of things that we can do in advance of some of those chronic issues. And even if we develop them, like let's say you develop some prediabetes, that happens to a lot of women, right? They hear, well, my blood sugar is a bit high, even when they're younger. The first thing that you should be doing is increasing your movement and exercise. So we absolutely have it within our power to prevent those things from getting worse. High blood pressure, I can't tell you how many women I do blood pressure measurements on, and they have high blood pressure and they have no idea because it doesn't have any symptoms. So just even, getting our blood pressure checked, making sure that again, I'm going to go back to exercise, that we're staying active because we can prevent and manage that increase in blood pressure. Not always. Sometimes it's genetic, but it's a really simple thing that we can do in terms of keeping ourselves healthy. And if we start to develop any of those illnesses, then we've got something in our toolbox right there. Reducing our stress, right? I mean, I know we talk about this all the time, but it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference in how we age if we've got stress management in place early.
So I'm going to ask you this then, because I've heard this said before from multiple, health dietitian people. It's 80% what you eat, 20% exercise. You're talking a lot about exercise. I mean, is that the right number, or is exercise equally as important as what you're eating?
Wow, that's really interesting. I'm someone who's going to go to the research, and I would say that and again, I'm biased. I'm an exercise physiologist, so I'm going to promote exercise more so than anything. But I think if you just look at the volumes and volumes and volumes of research that support exercise as prevention, as stress management, as a tool to manage mental health conditions, as preventing cardiovascular disease, prevention of several cancers. I could go on and on and on. I think that research outweighs anything around nutrition, and that may be controversial, but we know pretty solidly that exercise is that foundational piece of our healthy living. I think the jury is out on a lot of on what we eat. So you'll notice that, every year there's something different. We should be eating this, we should be eating that. It's really hard to do excellent nutrition science because of, you think about how many other factors there are around what people are putting in their bodies. So not to discredit healthy eating, 100% we need a healthy diet, but I think, and I don't want to say one against the other, but if it were me, exercise really holds up in the science more so than anything. I can't think of any other tool that we use in healthy living that has the volumes of research that physical activity does.
That makes sense. If I just think about like my own grandparents, I know that I have some who stayed active after they retired, and I have others who got very sedentary after they retired, and the health differences in the two are very apparent.
Yeah, I bet.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what counts as like exercise? How much exercise is needed in the course of a day for a woman, especially middle-aged, to be healthy?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what I typically tell people is that if you are walking, for instance, and a lot of women will say, well, how do I know when I'm, just out for a walk and I'm actually doing exercise? So the easiest way to tell is if you could, sing, you're probably not in exercise country, right? You're probably not working as hard. If you could carry on a conversation with a friend, but it's going to be a little bit of extra effort, then you are right in that area that we like to call moderate to vigorous exercise, which is where you want to be. When you look at those exercise recommendations, you want to be in that kind of moderate to vigorous. It's a bit tough to carry on a conversation, but you can do it. When you think about getting that kind of activity, when you're struggling to carry on a conversation a little bit, you're going to get your heart rate up, and you should be doing that about 150 minutes a week. And you can do that in bouts of 10 minutes or more. So those are the recommendations.
Wow, 10 minutes to get a workout in. That is impressive. Everybody has 10 minutes in their day to do that.
Exactly.
So, when you're looking at women and they come to you and with what you're seeing, I'm curious, what's the biggest like health no-no that you see middle-aged women doing and you're like, oh God, this just makes me cringe?
Yeah, I would say probably dieting. I think that idea of going on and off diets, a lot of women have done that throughout their lives, especially when they're younger. But by the time you start getting into, especially, 40s, 50s, where women are going through perimenopause, they're having those menopausal changes, they're having changes in their bone health. Every time we diet and we drop a lot of weight, we are also losing muscle mass. And sometimes we're losing a bit of bone as well. And women don't typically think about that, right? That there are other things that we're losing other than just fat. And sadly, when that weight goes back on, it doesn't go back on in the same ratio. So in other words, you're not just gaining back the exact same amount of muscle or the exact same amount of bone. What you typically put on is more fat when it goes back on. And so the worry for me is every time women go through that yo-yo dieting where, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to lose, 10 or 15 pounds because I feel like I put on this weight over the holidays, they're actually losing parts of their what we call lean body mass that they really need. So if you're trying to control your weight and you're losing muscle, it's going to be much more difficult for you to control your weight overall, right? Muscle is more efficient at burning calories. So if you're dropping that, you just need to be mindful that it's not always just fat that you're losing. So I cringe at dieting. We know dieting doesn't work. My wish would be that women get more active, that they have a healthy diet overall, that they're more mindful when they're eating, but not necessarily dieting.
That makes sense. Dieting's not fun anyway, and to hear that it's not good for you, it's like, okay. So talk with me about this middle age time frame in a woman's life, that perimenopause, menopause time. Why is that such an important, like, what's all going on in her body? Why is that such an important time in her life to kind of get things on track?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we don't talk about it a lot, right? It's really still one of those things it's considered a little bit shameful almost, which is really strange. I have a friend who's a menopause specialist, and she talks about menopause being kind of the opposite of puberty. So if you think about all those changes that you were going through in puberty, some of them can be kind of similar, right? Some of the mood swings, some of the changes in your body and not really recognizing what's happening. But also it's a really important time for our health. So when we have these shifts in hormones, so we have drops in estrogen, we have changes in our hormones overall. We have changes again in our bone health. We have changes in our cardiovascular risk. And this really catches up with women because I think typically we think of cardiovascular risk again as this thing that's happening to men, right? That it's usually men who have heart attacks, who get heart disease. And that's true until we get into that perimenopausal and menopausal time where our risk becomes identical to men. So our cardiovascular disease risk goes up, our changes in even our muscle mass. I mean, we have really significant changes that are happening during that menopausal transition. And most women are kind of, pardon the pun, but they're kind of sweating it out by themselves. There's not a huge amount of support for that time for women. And I think even from my own experience looking back, it's interesting, even in my, early 40s, late 30s, I was having perimenopausal symptoms. It's a long transition. And there are all sorts of things that I think women go through in their health, and they don't think about it being associated with perimenopause.
No, no. And it is. It's something that's not talked about really almost at all. You're right. So I want to pivot our conversation a little bit because one of the other things that I saw that you talk about is employers needing to invest in well-being programs for midlife and older women. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I just think this is such a huge issue right now, and it's really come to light during the pandemic that in 2022, the group that has the highest intention to leave. So, they did this big survey of employees asking them about, whether or not they'd be staying at their workplace. The number one group was women in mid-level management, and that group is almost entirely women in midlife, if you look at the numbers. When you look at C-suite jobs, so women in, much higher positions, they're leaving at the highest rates of all. And we know during the pandemic, the people who left their jobs were women. It's the kind of something's got to give, right? So, as a mom of a little one, I mean, there's a million things you're responsible for during the day. But you think about those women that are, as they get older, they've got those kids who are now, they're not necessarily all grown, but, a lot of women have teenage kids, they have kids in post-secondary, and they start caring for elderly parents. And they're having health issues with, the perimenopausal transition. They might be having chronic health issues, right? This is the time of life that a lot of women will develop things like diabetes and high blood pressure and the start of cardiovascular disease. Sadly, a lot of women, get into a little bit more chronic illness at this time. So I think employers, will see a woman at work who's just maintaining, and then she'll leave, she'll quit or take an early retirement. And because we already have a labor pool shortage, it's just something that I think would be crazy not to look at as an employer, that you've got these really usually quite loyal, long-term women with a lot of institutional knowledge. They're women who are mentors to other employees, and they leave the workplace, and these ones are not coming back. So when we hear about the Great Resignation, these are people who might be shifting into other positions, but in this group, they're not coming back to the workplace. So I think, spending some time having well-being programs that really recognize what's going on for women in midlife, all the stressors that they're dealing with, all the role conflict, the different changes in their health. They're just different ways that you can support women in that age group. And I think it's worth the investment for employers to retain that group. We're one of the biggest groups in population aging. So women, especially women over the age of 55, it's one of the biggest groups right now. So they're worth paying attention to.
I mean, it just makes sense, right? You want to keep good talent. If this is something you've got to put in place, why not look at it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about all these changes, right? Ailing parents and possibly, going through body changes. So if you're kind of in this time and it's already crazy, and then you tack on all these other things, time can get to be really scarce. So I guess what you talked about, exercise could take 10 minutes. So I guess what would be some of the things that women could do that can fit into that tight schedule, when they're in that stage of life?
Yeah, so I would say to everybody, but especially as you get older, one of the key things that you can do, and it may sound like nothing, but you can just move more. So we get really focused on this idea of exercise, right? Structured exercise. You got to go out and do your 30 minutes, or you got to do your class, your spin class, or you got to go to the gym. If we could just get people to move more, we have one of the most seated times in human history, right? The joke is that there's no chairs in the fossil record. We do everything sitting or, spending hours and hours and hours in a chair. So if we could just break up that sitting time, we know that makes a difference to your health. So,
okay. So I want to ask, because you see the stand-up desks and things. So if you just have that in your office, are you saying that is enough to make a difference?
Well, the jury's out still. The research is not conclusive on standing all day long. I don't know if that's the solution. I have a standing desk, but what I do is I break up sitting with my standing desk. So I will sit, then I'll stand, then I'll move. So I work on a timer, 25-minute increments. And for 5 minutes, every 25 minutes, I get up and move. I do a few yoga stretches. I might do a few squats. I try to integrate movement into my day all day long. This is a key piece, right? If we're telling people you have to exercise 30 minutes a day, but you can be totally sedentary for the other 23 and a half hours, it's crazy. That's not what the human body was designed to do, right? We were designed to move. So one of the key things that you can do is just move more, just get up and move more. And you'd be amazed at the difference that will make if you're doing it all day long. So if you say to yourself, I'm going to get up and move every 25, 30 minutes. And, one time a day after a meal, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. You think about, if you're someone who's ever worn a Fitbit or any sort of exercise tracker, you can see that if you're sitting all day long, your step count is very low, right? Your movement is really low. So if you can just get up and get yourself moving to start, I think that's the place that we need to begin. or all those people in January who go to the gym who haven't been doing any exercise and then they stop. That's typically why, right? It's too big of a leap to go from nothing to trying to get this routine in place. And the reason that I say that you should be moving more, other than the health benefits, and we know that there are health benefits from just breaking up that sitting time, we really need to get in that habit of more movement, right? So the second thing would be attaching your movement to something that you already do. So if you make coffee every morning, do a few squats while you're waiting for your coffee to brew. Do a one-legged balance while you're brushing your teeth. There are all sorts of ways that you can integrate strength, balance, movement into your day that won't take extra time. I commute to my office every day on foot, and it's 6 or 7 kilometers away from my house. I'm not quite sure what that is in miles, 3.5, 4 miles. So I either run there, I put a backpack on and I run to my office, or I walk. And it's just a way for me to get exercise into my day without giving up a ton of extra time. With a little one, you're probably moving around a lot, right?
Oh, he's starting to walk. So I'm on the go a lot these days.
Yeah. Yeah. And before that, you're probably pushing a stroller, right? Getting around in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So wherever you can just fit in that extra movement, even if you can't go to the gym, just something is better than nothing.
And I would imagine this has got to be even more important now, coming out of 2 years of a pandemic and everything closed down and people being stuck at home. I bet you that's going to influence the numbers with, like you said, heart health and all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, we have had this time where people have been sitting, more than ever during the last few years. And then we get into those habits of sitting, right? I mean, working from home is great, but it doesn't really allow us to move much, right? If you only have to go from your bedroom to the desk that you're working at in your house, you're not going very far. That commute, we know that when people are commuting, even by transit, that they're getting an extra 2,500 steps typically per day. So I don't know if you collect your steps, if you've ever looked at your step count, but 2,500 it's a lot. So just by taking the bus, you're getting that extra movement. So just something to consider for those folks who've been sitting for the last few years in their homes and they've thought, why have I gained all this weight? I haven't really changed my eating habits. It's probably about how much you're moving.
It makes a ton of sense. Kate, you offer ways for people to get help and to get some training to kind of make some of these changes that we talked about here. How can people find you? Where can they go to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of my time on social media there. They can visit my website, agesister.com or cardeahealthconsulting.com. AgeSister is probably the easiest one to remember. There's freebies on both of those sites and downloads. And I am available for coaching or workplace help as well.
Awesome. Well, I make sure those links will be in the show notes here for Soul Source, so listeners will be able to get in touch with you. Kate, thank you for being here. I mean, you literally shared life-saving tips with me today, so thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. And if you want to hear more Soul Source, just subscribe to our show. We're available wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can watch us too. We're on YouTube. Just look for Soul Source. Soul Source is brought to you by Red Shoes Inc., a leading agency specializing in crisis and strategic communications, media relations, social media, and so much more. To learn more about Soul Source and Red Shoes, visit us at redshoesinc.com.